Okay, good evening, everybody. Didn't rain today, that's good. Hi and welcome. You know why we're here, and it is my really great pleasure to welcome the architect and the Robert A.M. Stern Visiting Professor Ann Beha as our speaker tonight. This is the annual Gordon H. Smith Lecture in Practical Architecture. So the Gordon H. Smith Lecture was established by Gordon Smith in 1980. Mr. Smith is with us through the technology offered by YouTube tonight, so he's listening to the lecture. So a warm welcome to you, Gordon, and thank you for your generosity to the school. Mr. Smith received his Bachelor of Engineering degree from Yale in 1957, and his generosity extends to Yale College as well, where he supports generous scholarships for 2 undergraduates each year. If you're a student here and his name sounds somewhat familiar to you, it's because room 322 on the 3rd floor, where you may take a seminar, is named in honor of Mr. Smith and his late wife, Norma, the Norma and Gordon Smith conference room. And if you are a practitioner, you probably know his name because after leaving Yale, he founded a consulting firm, the Gordon H. Smith Corporation, which specializes in exterior walls and cladding. Now, past speakers in this annual lecture include the great engineer Robert Sillman, along with Guy Nordenson, Cecil Baumann, Elizabeth Flatter-Zyberk, and Liz Diller, among many others. As I said, it's been since 1980, so it's a long list. And I am very happy to add Ann Beha to that list. Ann Beha, F-A-I-A, is the founder of Ann Beha Architects, or ABA, which is now called Annum Architects. And the firm has been honored many, many times by the AIA, and Ann herself has received the Boston Society of Architects Honor Award and the Women in Design Awards of Excellence, and the inaugural Award of Honor from the U.S. Department of State's Overseas Building Operations. The practice is best known, and those of you in her studio know this, for championing preservation and adaptive reuse in dialogue with contemporary design. And what I appreciate about the work is how it reconsiders and approaches historic resources. The practice is now 40 years old. They've designed U.S. embassies in Paris and Athens and have done work for MIT, Harvard, numerous community-based institutions. And at Yale, they did the renovation and expansion of the James Gamble Rogers 320 York Street building, now known as the Humanities Quadrangle, which received honor awards from the Society of College and University Planning and from AIA Connecticut. And if you haven't been yet, I suggest taking a walk down York Street. It's actually great and a very subtle and adept renovation, truly adaptive reuse and rethinking that building. Ann received her Master of Architecture degree from MIT and her BA from Wellesley College, and she was a Loeb Fellow at the GSD and currently serves on Harvard's Campus Design Advisory Council. So please join me in welcoming her for her lecture, Straight Up with a Twist.
Thank you so much, Deborah. It's a complete honor to be here at Yale, and I also want to thank Gordon Smith and say to him that generosity is, I think, such a true and valued aspect of any professional, any citizen, anybody, and to see it in play so well at Yale is remarkable and appreciated. So let's talk for a minute about the present and the future. And I want to say that this is the studio that George Knight and I are leading. Yes, I work for George. And this is Symphony Hall, McKim Mead and White, 1901. Next slide, or shall I do it? Okay. And the students are looking at an adaptive reuse, a renovation, and an expansion, a much-needed expansion of Symphony Hall, not just to support classical music, but to explore the entire world of cultural resources and how they connect with and advance community intentions and civic and urban spaces. But let's say something about lectures. Lectures are great. They're great on words, they're great on descriptions, and I think that we've given the students every aspect of description of the BSO building, every rationale for it, discussions of its engineering, discussions of its purpose, its needs, its materiality, but nothing beats going there. I think words and descriptions can't be the emotion. So we went, and the sense of the interior and the sense of being on the stage, which they were last Saturday, and then the sense of attending a concert adds to the perception and the pleasure of a building. So I'm viewing this experience and thanking, first of all, Dominique for arranging all this travel and saying that the other aspect of the Yale program, which is so extraordinary, and I hope to live through it, is the trip. And being there, going there, being in a building is the third leg of the stool that makes architecture. We can have the words, we can have the images, all the pictures, the media, but being in the space adds that dimension that nothing I can say tonight can do. Nonetheless, I'm going to indulge in documents and pictures and descriptions, and I have kind of a Noah's Ark approach to this. I've got 3 sets of 2. The first 2 projects are landmarks that are reconceived and re-identified. The second 2 are buildings placed in landmark settings, or let's just say valued contexts, where one could argue either there's a landmark or there's something that's so important to a community that that sense of place must be respected and enabled to move forward. And then the third pair have not got a whole lot to do with each other, but they're just things I'm working on right now, and you be the judge. They're both, one's about to go into construction, is in construction, and the other is going through permitting, so they have different kinds of profiles. So let's start in Chicago. And I might come down and be with you a little more. Can you, Trevor, can you hear this if I do this? Okay, because I like to look too. And in the 20s, the Chicago Theological Seminary established its headquarters in Chicago on the edge of the University of Chicago campus. Seminaries have changed, schools of theology have changed, and the University of Chicago acquired this with an outstanding deferred maintenance debt of close to $10 million a number of years ago. And they wanted to make it the center for an academic enterprise, the economics department, a world-famous department. So the issue essentially was how to value the building, how to honor its past, but in a sense to secularize it, because everyone needed to feel welcome, and its liturgical kind of trappings and heritage couldn't really move the building forward in terms of a unified constituency and identity. So the first thing, and I want to talk a little about methodology, was to find out, well, what's all this deferred maintenance about? And of course, it's about water, essentially. And water and money and the deterioration of materials. So one aspect of practice for me and now for Annum architects is to understand the fabric of the building, to get up close and to determine how to care for it. So the stewardship aspect is central to the work. The second is to figure out its place in the city. And obviously this building's place was that a truck dock could drive through it, and it was the remainder of a street. And so the question of unification and identity all came together as we started to look at how to program it and how to get offices, collaborative spaces, economics classrooms, and just plain people spaces into a building that had never been built for those purposes. And you'll see there in the blocks of blue and gray something that's coming up. So coming back to the fabric of the building, it was also the heritage of what they did versus the heritage or the instinct and need that the university had. And we started by cleaning and, if you will, sort of unveiling the quality of this building. And we kept bringing students through it faculty through it so that they could get used to the idea that they were not going to be teaching in a church. They were going to be teaching in a building that had a story, and they were going to make the new story. So cleaning it and then repurposing it so that it's a vital daily use was part of the work. And this, of course, you'll see, those of you who are engineers, you see no ductwork, you do not see sprinklers, you see sleepless nights trying to make all that work. But the effective way that we worked with systems here in the historic spaces was to try to conceal them and integrate them as much as possible so we could retain the original fabric. So that space that was the chapel is now the Graduate Student Center. It's set up for parties and events. And as you can see, the integration of new lighting and old lighting doesn't seem to be, I don't think they're fighting with each other. I think they're having a conversation. And that's true also in some of the more Harry Potter-esque areas, which were dim and difficult to navigate, where lighting and restoration really made the space, gave the space an opportunity to welcome people and to move them through the building. There are a lot of, yeah.
I can't interrupt you. As lovely as it is to have you so close, YouTube isn't picking up your sound.
Okay.
So if you could go back to the mic, that would be great.
Okay. Too bad, because you didn't come to New Haven. So you saved on gas, you saved on carbon footprint, but you missed us. As my family will tell you, I'm available for lecturing anytime. So if you missed much, I'll come back to it. So I've been talking about the University of Chicago. So we've talked a little bit about the kind of stewardship aspect and repurposing. Now I'm going to talk about the intervention, because that's the other side of the coin of the work that these two projects represent, and the clarity of that. So maybe I'm going to explain the reason I named this lecture what I did, but clarity is really important. Transparency, clarity, the sense of knowing what you're getting into. And this is a stair that's inserted between the steps, between the buildings, and it speaks to the fact that we were able to get the city to redirect the traffic and get it out of the middle of the building. So we're able to unify the structure. There are lots of ways to move around the building, and other interventions put you more in the landscape. And then there are opportunities. So when we walked through this, lots of people thought, you know, it's just an attic. And we said, no, no, no. This is the IKEA loft. You can go up here anytime. You can move everything around. And indeed, in revisiting this, it's all over the place. It's a studio. We're used to this. Economists are not used to this. And these kinds of spaces are really a found pleasure for the younger people who need to collaborate and get work done and have a place they can call their own, and they just get out of the fray. And then finally, the other intervention, of course, is the need for a large lecture hall, which the structure gave no sense of. You could not make such a space and keep this building intact. So we excavated, and we dug down for both mechanical systems, and we used the kind of tightness of the below-grade envelope to develop a greater sustainability about the systems. And we also then were able to create a well-lit, large lecture room that is used by the department and really by the whole university. So in the back, there was also an opportunity. I'm always big on, you go where the dumpsters are, go where there's a problem, and then come up with something that really makes it a place for people. So this was the back alley before it was closed, and that's that space now. And the street is a shared street. The opening is closed. The buildings are united. And then this pavilion building, which is 4 stories, is for economics research and collaborative work. And you can see that it's full of open spaces with views out, and it just has a scale that was intentionally trying to participate in the heritage of the small row houses along that side street, so that it sat comfortably behind them as part of a new and old conversation. So following Chicago, we were asked to take a look at 320 York Street. And we could bring a lot of lessons, but the 320 York Street project is 2.5 times as large as Chicago, with many more conditions and much more complexity. It's a full block environment. It had been a dorm and graduate center, and it is now the Center for Humanities. And it too, in the early 20th century, had levels of craft that we see rarely, and wonderful spaces with some furniture still there. And it also had lots of lesser spaces that had their own flavor, but gave you a sense that you could be going anywhere. And as they said in Soviet Russia, if you don't know where you're going, what are you doing here? So as a space for people and for collaboration, this was the way it was organized. And the architects know this purple basically represents one kind of use, and the idea was to change and integrate new uses. So whatever the colors mean, you can see that the hands are intersecting now, and that they're collaborative spaces mixing with offices and mixing with meeting spaces. I'm doing this because I think Gordon Smith is, as an engineer, focused also on how things get done. These are images of some of the research and repair work. Here are some of the folks doing that work, and the day-to-day activities there, including the restoration, working with craftsmen. Trying to find a lot of craftsmen in the Connecticut area was part of this process. There were literally hundreds of leaded glass windows that had to be restored. There's no one crafts company that can do that. We had to have 3 different leaded glass groups all throughout the Northeast take on a portion of the job. So now you're seeing the results, which is a kind of, if you will, rekindling of the spirit of the space and the materials. Much of it changed because it is now completely accessible for ADA purposes. So these levels are raised even though the stone is put back as it was. And in it also is a new stair, a new vertical connector that unifies the building. And if we were all having a lecture there, we could do that via that stair without disturbing any of the offices. So we did need the stair to go someplace reasonable. This is where it was going. And now that space is a student concourse. It's below grade, but it includes open spaces, lots of borrowed light, and a kind of light touch for doing whatever you need to do. And then finally here also, the goal was a lecture hall and the goal was a film center. So there was no way to add footprint to the site. The idea, again, was to find that outside of changing the structure of the building, find those opportunities for the broad span functions, and so that's what we did. And we brought Chicago to Yale, but Yale taught us so much that was different, and it was so complex. And now these spaces are quite different, fresh. I'm thrilled to see people using them back after COVID. And they have skylights that go out into the garden above, but this is all under essentially a green roof. And that's the lecture hall. So historic spaces are certainly well cared for in this building, but that contrast with the more contemporary spaces is intentional, and hopefully it's a marriage that's a happy one, where there's a legibility. I think that buildings teach, and occupying a building like this should be both an opportunity to reference Yale's history and legacy, but also to think about the way we teach now, the way we learn, and the kinds of integration of contemporary design that are possible within historic spaces. And that's the green roof, the courtyard. So I'm glad, Deborah, thank you for mentioning it, and I hope people will go there. So that's 2 that are similar, and they're both landmarks, and the intention is the integration of new things and the redemption or redevelopment or reassertion of things from legacy period. It takes a huge team, and I can't go forward in talking about 2 more projects without saying that although I give the lecture, it's a great team of people, including Yale Facilities, who make it happen, and they deserve tremendous credit. Let's go someplace else. This is in northern Vermont, and it doesn't really look like it's anywhere. But it's the edge and visible edge of one of the most interesting regional museums in the United States. It's a museum of folk art. And it's in Shelburne, Vermont, and they gave us a site and said, we want this building to be visible, we want it to be speak to our century, and we want it placed within this historic context of our 27 other buildings, all covering periods from the early 18th century right through to about 1890. They had never had a 20th century building built on the site. We looked a lot at the buildings around this site, and they were of great scale. Of course, simplicity reigns because it's New England. And within them, these remarkable collections that all winter long were shut up because none of the buildings are climate controlled. So the idea of this building was as a new center which could stay open all year and offer year-round programming and collections display. And the budget was tight. So we came up with a very simple idea of exhibition, the lobby, education area, with lots of views to the site. The idea of the building is that you don't spend all day there. You go there to get oriented, to see something, and then let's get out. Let's go see the real McCoy from the 19th century. Let's see the collections in situ, the way the donor planned them. And what I'm going to talk about for both these projects is the client group. So in this case, this is a typical workshop, and as you can see, this client was actively engaged in determining what would happen. There were hands-on sessions again and again and again, and lots of models, lots of options, and they needed to time travel to understand what they felt and could build consensus about was a piece of 21st century architecture. If you've skipped the 20th, what's the 21st? And when you say you want a contemporary building in an historic setting, what do 12 people really mean when they say that? And what does the community of Shelburne mean when they say that? So we started to develop what I call the series of options. And I spared you 4,000 of them and brought about 5. But we just kept pushing the question of, what about more glass? What about siding? How tall can we be? What about the connector being glass? What about the use of stone? That's common to your area, and we can use Champlain stone. What about cedar? Yes, there's maintenance, but it's from around here. What about large oculus? Can we look out? How do we feel about a flat roof? When can we start to think about a porch? And the narrative of how you make a building, for me, is one of interface and interpersonal connections on a professional basis where each side is pushing each other forward. And the outcome has to be something the architect believes in, but the client has to feel passionately enthusiastic about. So we did finally get there. And I'm just showing you how we got there, and that is largely through the use of common area materials. So beech flooring, cedar siding, stone, referring to the stone already on the site, setting up mock-ups, letting everybody see it. There were a lot of snowy trips. And this is the building now, and it sits as the gateway building to the entire campus. And it is, as I said, just made of very simple materials, a very, very resilient curtain wall because of the climate extremes in that part of Vermont, rubble stone from local, and then wood siding and very simple detailing. And it has tall spaces inside, Vermont slate flooring, and a large meeting room that's used for everything from craft fairs to weddings, with views out onto the site. And then again, this idea that transportation between the two floors should feel like a flow that's engaged with views as well as engaged with simple materials. And always the view. That's the Ticonderoga, a riverboat to die for that crossed Lake Champlain. So people saw this building and they liked it very much, and they liked it because it was speaking to a new setting. And we have always done a lot of work in education, and we were retained to develop a new lower school in Connecticut, in Greenwich, Connecticut. And many of the people who were supporting the school and parents knew something about our work in preservation and historic architecture, but they had also seen Shelburne and they wanted something very modern. So for me, modern is a very broad word. It doesn't really have a perfect interpretation, but we moved into site planning. Sasaki had done a very, very good master plan, and we developed a plan for a lower school and for an extension on the middle school. This is a campus that's located in a residential area. It has outbuildings, and its historic centerpiece is a stone, sort of Queen Anne style building constructed around 1901. We started the process by talking to the students about what they wanted from a school, what they didn't have, what they needed, and what it would be like to build a building that could fit in with the campus. And we heard amazing creative things from them. And we also worked with their faculty, imagining that as well. We came up with the idea of this looser arrangement for the lower school. Often there'd be a straight corridor and classrooms on each side, and you have to go where you're told to go. This is a more flowing idea about collaboration and loose spaces. What we didn't know is that in Greenwich there is a design review committee that wasn't so invested in, this is a recorded lecture, wasn't so invested in the idea of a modern building anywhere. And ours are conservative, this isn't like Daniel Libeskind comes to Greenwich. So we started in working with this volunteer group, and all respect to their volunteerism, a really interesting process. And they said, our school buildings are brick. So, of course, all I have to hear is something like that, and I'm in the car driving to every school building in the area to see if it's true. And there's some truth to it. Greenwich High School is brick. But then I found that there were other buildings that weren't so brick. And it's important to do your homework. You've got to spend time knowing the community. So we came back and said, I think there's some room here. And what we started to talk to them about again was the materials that made this area of Connecticut precious to them. And those materials were not all brick. They were wood, they were stone, they had other aspects to them, and they were eclectic. There's no community that has cookie cutter that's quite like this. This is very, very inclusive of many designs and many styles. So we asked for some freedom. And we started to look at whether this building, which we wanted to have sit in the land, could be stone or wood. How would that be? What would be the different materials? What did the students think? We set up mock-ups. Of course, all you have to do is say the word mock-up, and it's like you're at the Red Sox. It's a blood sport, and everybody comes. It's really great, and the school ran a fantastic process. So we finally settled on our materials. We started to look at how this building on the right would really, excuse itself from a direct relationship with the original building, which is on the left, but allow their kind of serviceable buildings to continue to exist between and then establish its own identity. And these are just some renderings of the building before it was constructed, showing the way that materials would be applied. And you can see down below the views during construction, then up above the completion. And I show this because there's such a long period of time where all you're seeing is this pea green or the lime green on your building. And it's like, when is the installation? When are we going to get finished with this? So this is the interior now, and these are just some shots of the school. And it's really joyous to go there and see this kind of loose arrangement of spaces be used and all the noise and fun that people are having. And they're adapting it too. They're changing it to meet their needs and really, the kids are kind of in control. It's really fun. The library. And views out. I mean, the idea of being in this kind of area is that the landscape's important, and so many of the traditional school buildings that everyone wanted us to look at have small windows, and the idea is, no, you're focused on the teacher, you never look out, you don't connect with the landscape. So this was the way you arrived at the Greenwich Academy at that particular entrance, and this is that entrance now. And then just coming along that street, these are the two buildings, left and right, the lower school on the left, the middle school on the right, and really a lot of attention to the green space and recapturing that for all kinds of reasons between the buildings, making a campus where there's really just been a lot of parking, a lot of pathways. So I'm just going to say a little bit about what I'm up to now. And these are two projects that I'm really excited about and have been working on for a while. And they have quite different profiles. They are in valued settings. Their settings, in one case, are heavily regulated, and in the other case, not so heavily regulated. There's definitely fabric and pattern to the buildings around them that's extremely strong. And in one case, the landscape is part of that pattern and fabric that should dictate how we solve the future. So first is a school outside Albany. It's a girls' school called Emma Willard, landscaped by Olmsted, stone buildings, all of these kind of collegiate Gothic kind of Tudor buildings with their own eclectic flavors. And the buildings are substantial. Phil Bernstein knows them well. And they are also very, very important to their alums and to their students. This is a 4-year experience that is very immersive. And if you ever were on a campus as a teenager where you were learning something about architecture, you would be learning on this campus. They have buildings by Todd Williams, Billy Sen. They have other modern masters, and of course they have their original probably 15 buildings of this type. This was their gymnasium. Girls' gymnasiums have their own DNA, and they consist of exercise areas. You wear uniforms that hit the ground when you kneel. I've been there, done that. And they have tracks above. So it's an open space with lots of facilities for various kinds of gymnastics, modest gymnastics. And in the 1950s, the school decided to make it a chapel. Post-war, there was no worship space on the campus, and that became very important. So the way the building has been looking for the last decades is like this. All of its original design is erased, with the exception of the swimming pool, which is in the basement. And the swimming pool is now not used. They have a wonderful natatorium by Todd and Billy. And we were asked to do a performing arts center in that building. So I'm jumping to the conclusion because I want you to see that we are indeed scraping this building out. We've done an historic preservation study and certainly retaining all of the structure, the stone, the incredible truss systems, the leaded glass, but the floor, indicated by the red dashed lines, between the current chapel and the swimming pool is already gone. And that's so that we don't need to add an addition above for a fly for theater. Instead, by depressing the stage and raking the floor sharply, we can develop a fly area over our stage that fits within the gabled roof. So this is a rendering of the room as it was at design development, with a window that's been, beautiful window that's been disused for years, restored and in place, side balconies, the stage itself, set up in this case for music, but it's also available for dance. And we also have a stage extension, in fact, 2 stage extensions that will help bring the performers out into the audience. It'll also be used every day for lectures and all school meetings. And the view back up, you can see everyone is tiered. There is a kind of pew arrangement like these seats. And then we have the stepped balconies to the left and the right, wrapped in a kind of bronze mesh. So all of the reflectors and details of the theater technology are fitted between the rafters. They will be visible, but there is definitely this moment where new and needed technologies will be interfacing with the historic fabric. But the needs of the school were not fully satisfied just by renovating that building, and that's now in construction. The idea was that for real arts education, they could extend that building and have a performance and rehearsal space. So dance studios, black box theater for smaller theatrical performances and music, and a music practice room, some larger scale spaces that they didn't have. So we started to look at that, and we started to look at the site. And you can see now on this site how intense the original design is, with the campus buildings all being organized around the inner campus green. But just beyond the chapel was the playing fields. Yet here's the building from the late 20th century here. The chapel is here. This is an important 4-story building here. We just kept thinking that we could extend this, but the question was, is it crowded? How do you extend it? How do you make this happen so that the facilities you're building are on the same level as the performance space in the adjacent chapel? So we've sunk it. And the stage level will line up with the connection that goes to this below grade space. Each of these spaces will have natural light, but they'll only just poke out of the ground. And it'll also connect to their adjacent multi-purpose kind of arts and library building, and there'll be a new connector that takes you back to the theater. So it's kind of a circular connection, and the idea is to be able to move freely between real performance, rehearsal, preparation, scenery, all of the kind of functions of theater, and to create one home for this that's also connected to the library and other academic facilities. And this is where we are right now. Actually, that's a hole right now. And it is a slightly peaked roof. It's an inhabited space. It's designed so that everyone can sit on there during softball games and other games. There's a big tennis area right out there. And this fin is the brow that comes over the glass that goes down into those 4 rooms. And then the connector is just up here, bringing you back into the chapel. And here it's below grade, taking you to the stage. This will take about a year and a half or so to complete, maybe a little bit more. This is just a view of the simple dance studios. I think one of the things that Hope we're known for is a kind of spareness of materials. I think a lot of times it's important that the people who run the theaters and run the dance be able to manage and adapt those spaces to their needs. And so in working with them, what we're giving them is essentially an acoustic shell and a proper set of finishes and floors, and then welcoming them to adapt it over time to what they need most. So every room is carefully organized for its acoustics, but the real sense here is that you can have people moving between these spaces to do lots of different things. And that's the last slide of that. So those are the 3 pairs. I see connections between them. I don't know if everyone else does, but I think part of the connections are the processes of engagement with the client groups and their constituents, and the level of association that one has with the faculty and the users of the building, as well as the idea that one doesn't always need to build above in order to be effective. Sometimes what's important to do is to build within the landscape rather than on the landscape. So just before we end, let me just say something about new chapters. As Deborah said, my new chapter is now a senior collaborating architect with Annum Architects, which is the successor firm to Beha Architects. The new name indicates a new generation of leadership, and they are amazing, and it is just a pleasure to watch them soar. So in this chapter, I have the independence for initiatives like the one I'm in right now, teaching at Yale, something I could never do when I was running a practice. And I have an opportunity for more advocacy in my community, for more engagement with the profession, for exploring a widened view of practice and its potential to impact. And I would say that teaching the studio with George and working with the 10 students we have has already illuminated the way I feel that architecture can be explained and learned and shared with people who are so enthusiastic and so talented. So because I have this new world swirling around me and the opportunity to do something about it, I invested $27 in a new domain name. And that domain name is, oh, shit, I forgot this thing. I want the cocktail so badly. All right, I'm going to show you this one. And, oh, man. Okay, so, well, I did put this in last night, so I'm a little hazy on it. All right, so this is in the South End, so everybody has an opinion. I'm just going to say that. This is an area of Victorian brick buildings, and there's a very strong Latinx community in this area of the city. So this is a new community building for the Latinx community, and we're doing it as a collaboration with another firm, Studio AIA, which is run by Natasha Espada, who herself is Puerto Rican. And they have asked us to develop a new building on this site in one of Boston's most historic districts. Read lots of concern. And of course, as a very important organization in our city, they want a building that's fresh and vibrant. So we have gone through a process of looking at how the fabric of these Victorians, which are the natural part of this city, they are the heritage of this, and how a new building, how they scale together, how you start to read the openings and the lines. And this is a process that Natasha and I have found we do with all of our projects as we try to fit them in. There's always these kind of diagram efforts to integrate their alignment. And here is the site now, and we are just getting through our permitting. This will be the building. It is a terracotta rain screen, simple building of curtain wall construction. It's 4 stories. It has all kinds of community facilities in it. And I would have to say it was not what the Historic Commission in the South End expected. But they have been amazing. And the collaboration with them has brought along the approvals so that we really are getting close now to being able to get our final approvals in the city and get going on this, fill this hole, and start delivering these services. And our office is also handling these kinds of performance spaces that are in the building, and we are looking not only at the simplicity of it, but also how it engages with the nearby playground. And you can see here that there's an enormous big door in the middle of it, which we would love to have open onto the playground so that both there's interior activities and then it bleeds out into the neighborhood. And the community has been incredibly supportive of this. The Landmarks Commission has really come a long way with us, and we've come a long way with them, working with them, and we've learned so much from each other. So that's what's going on. I hope to get a start. We'll get in the ground on this probably I'm hoping in the fall. So back to the $27. So I invested $27 on a new domain name, and that's the name. And nobody had bought this. I mean, there are citizen architects, but there's no architect citizen. And I figured, well, that's what I am. I'm an architect. I can't not be an architect, but I'm a citizen. And maybe in the years to come, I have a little more time to exercise that citizen part of my life. So what does that mean? Well, so far, it means practice, because I am. It means education, and thank you, yes. It means advocacy and going to a lot of community meetings that before you just said, well, I'll just listen to the Zoom. It means engagement with a lot of people who have development going up near them and are not enfranchised to speak out about what they need. And our studio knows that because we've had, even on the Symphony Hall project, advocates for public housing speaking to us directly. And those people need to be heard. And it means communications. So communications are the fabric of this lecture. They are also the fabric of how one explains to a community what an architect can do and should be doing. And communications with the city and with regulatory groups is all an effort to try to help us grow together towards understanding that we can have our legacy, we can have our stories, but we need to broaden our sense of what legacy is, extending it to more members of our community and more different groups. And we need to understand that communication around that is going to bring that into the front, and we're going to be able to work better with our communities. So the last thing is urgency, and that has nothing to do with my age. But it does have a sense that there are a lot of problems out there that architects are particularly well qualified to address. But in my practice of 40 years, we haven't nailed them. So it is very urgent that we get on this. And this is a matter for each person to identify what this means. But for me, urgency means the need to move the ball forward on getting problems solved and getting procedures in place that will allow for the best of design excellence to come to every community. And I guess the other urgency piece, just to paraphrase Billy Crystal in When Harry Met Sally, not that scene, but another one, he says something like, so when you finally figured out what you want to do with your life, you want to have it start as soon as possible. So that's what I think the urgency means. Once you really decide what you want to do, you want to kick it up and get it going. And that's what my next chapter, I hope, will be about. So the final thing, Deborah and I were talking about why this title, because it's kind of mysterious. And so I'll share this with Deborah. I was thinking about this title, and I think that one of the things I've always hoped for in my work is clarity. And I think this title is about clarity, and clarity of movement, clarity of appreciation, clarity of care. And I also believe in bespoke vessels. And I think this speaks to that but there's no kidding around. I also believe in the twist. The twist is a zinger. It's part of my work, part of the work I've done with my teams. A twist, clarity, the bespoke, the special, and the impact. Don't have two. The impact. All of that was what I was thinking about when I named this. And then I thought about the twist, the zinger, because it always feels right and it always makes the place. And I realize I'm the only thing standing between you and that. So I figure the questions will be brief. How is it you could not present a project? Well, that's a good question.
Any questions, anybody?
They want the cocktail.
Well, okay, so it is, oh wait, we have a question. Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
Regarding your push for advocacy at a younger age once you know something. What is your recommendation for those who are in school right now and about to hit the workforce? How can they instigate the kind of advocacy that you're alluding to earlier on in their careers?
Well, when I got out of school, there were no jobs. So far, you're a winner because there are jobs. In 1975, I was a chronic volunteer. You want to be on this committee? Oh, yeah, absolutely. These people need somebody. Can you go there? I'll be there. I was a chronic volunteer. And when I showed you the EBA project, the last project, the way we're not, I'm not a Latinx architect. Natasha is. She's the best, perfect fit for EBA. But I got on that list because I was a volunteer on a community issue in that area. So one of the things I say is you move forward through your passion, and you move forward by sharing your passion with other people. And if you can get involved in as many organizations that really fire you up and be helpful to them, do it with integrity. You're not looking for its outcome on your job hunt, but it's amazing how it comes back to you. It's amazing how it comes back to you. So just don't sit still. You see it, go there. They probably don't have an architect on their committee, and they probably could really, really use one. You. So, and I had to give a lot of that up, running a firm. As I said, every Sunday I was writing a proposal, and then Deborah would get the job. And so, you can't do everything, right? You can't do everything. And so this decision about, having a new chapter is a chance to do more of the things I really have always wanted to do, and just, it got tight.
Phil has a question.
Phil.
So, Anne, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the transition in your firm. Strongly led firms by single practitioners have a really pretty lousy reputation or record for transitioning their ownership to the next generation.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit sort of philosophically about how you did that? And
We are never going to get a cocktail.
Okay.
Never, and it's Phil's fault. Yes, and in fact, many people have asked me about that, Phil, because people are concerned. Many people build firms, and then they know that they see this next generation coming up, usually that's more capable in so many ways, and they go, well, where's the path? And mine was, it's close to me because it just happened in July. We just finished it in July, so it's a little too close to really say, well, this was the formula. But the bottom line is, I wanted my independence. If you are going to transition your company, it shouldn't be because you're losing money and doing terribly. We were doing great, but I wanted my independence. And I knew that I wasn't going to have a chance to wait 10 years and then say, I've got 10 years of independence. So these people took me to dinner and said, we want to talk about your transition. And I sat down and I said, well, so, what are you all thinking? And they said, well, we think maybe the next 4 or 5 years. And I looked at them and I said, look, I don't want to get personal here, but how old are you? And they told me, and I said, you're going to be like 85 when you transition. How old are the people in your firm? And these people said, well, they're in their 50s. I said, pass the butter. It's like we're talking about something else. I wanted something. So, and I felt there was something, and I know there is something, because look at me, I got lucky and got invited to be here. And I know that it just wouldn't have happened if I'd kept at the same rate. And I don't think all the people in the office who are so talented, 3 partners and 3 associate principals, and then all the people, they just won't stay if you don't get out of their way. You got to get out of their way. They've got to do their thing. And it's really thrilling to watch them. And then you go, But no, they're amazing. They're amazing. They're amazing. They're amazing. They're amazing. And I hope that I help them be amazing. And I'm always there for them. I love working with them on the projects, but I don't need to be doing what they're doing. They can handle Sundays.
Thank you.
Thank you.